Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, what's up? How we doing? Hopefully y'all got me. Microphone just lost connection the second we went live, but that's okay. We'll go off the computer mic here for a second until I get that figured out. But hey, portal is rolling. Welcome in GC Live. We're going to try to keep you updated on everything that has happened so far and maybe get into a couple things that could happen moving forward as the transfer portal officially opens and I would say madness ensues throughout college football. Again, this is GC Live. We are presented by our good friend Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. Welcome in. Again, if you're in the market to buy a home, Clint is a mortgage broker right here in Columbia, but can help you out no matter where you are in the great state of South Carolina. I appreciate Clint and his support. As always, want to go ahead and tell y'all real quick, if you are not a subscriber on Gamecock Central, numbers have been absolutely through the roof this week, and that's because there's so much going on around college football and around Gamecock Nation. If you haven't tried us, come try us out. 2 months for $1. Use the code SCAR1, SCAR1. You will get your first 2 months for just $1 total. We'd love to have you over. Our goal is for you to know some of the news before it even comes out. And hopefully, once you try us out on GamecockCentral.com, you'll see that's absolutely the case. Chris, let's try to make sense of everything. Luckily for Carolina fans, man, they got some of the negative out of the way last week with things kind of leaking out and the word sort of getting out, hey, this guy's expected to hit the portal. This guy may hit the portal. And, you know, there have been some guys kind of trickling out since then, but for the most part, nobody to the level of a Juice Wells. So that part's kind of out of the way. That part's kind of expected. He did go ahead and officially enter the portal today as we do this show on Monday. But likewise, some positive news for South Carolina coming out the last 24 to 48 hours in terms of players that could have gone to other places, players that could have gone on to the NFL, announcing their intentions, and potentially some more good news to come.
Yeah, I think there is, man. And you're right. You know, I think, Wes, a couple things about the portal as kind of a housekeeping item. You know, I think Gamecock fans have been a little taken aback maybe by the sheer volume, like the number of guys that have entered the portal or that we reported last week were going to enter the portal. You know, that number, I haven't checked it lately, but it's somewhere between, 13 to 16, somewhere in that range, right? It's a double-digit number. And so I think some people see or hear that number and get concerned, right? Like, why are there so many guys entering the portal? And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the why. But also, some of the more impactful guys are guys that you think could be impactful. So there are two obvious ones: Juice Wells, Mitch Jeter, starters, big time players at their position, proven performers, right? You got that. Then you have a guy like an Emory Ford. Why am I think I have all sorts of personnel on my mind, right? You have a guy like Omega Blake, right, who enters the portal, took a step forward this season, made some plays, but has not reached maybe what you think his full potential could be. So you're looking forward to 2024. You're going, okay, there's no Xavier Legette, there's no Juice Wells, some of the reserve wide receivers who have not played as big of a role. That room seems pretty wide open. Why would Omega Blake leave? Because it seems like he might be a starter. Again, given how the career's gone, there was a feeling that, hey, maybe a fresh start is best, right? So I think out of the numbers that you have, it is important to keep a context, right? If you're South Carolina, have you lost some impact? There is no doubt. Have you lost all of the starters off of your team to the transfer portal? Have you lost all the impactful players that you could have in this new era? Absolutely not, right? And quite contrary, right? We know that Tonka Hemingway is coming back, as he's announced. TJ Sanders, we reported, is coming back. We expect Boogie Huntley to be back, and there are others. So, again, looking at just the sheer numbers, that doesn't really tell the full picture, Wes.
Hey, Chris, who knows? We could get news before we even get off the air today, which
I think we
would
will.
be cool for us to talk about as well. All right. I frankly don't even know where to start with all this. Let's start in reverse, actually. Let's go ahead and talk about a few targets in the portal, because I think that's something fans are certainly interested in. And I'll be honest with y'all, I've been trying to get our sort of what's supposed to be a target big board watch list updated to the point of hitting update on it to the public for literally since I woke up this morning. And it's
It's hard.
it has become, I wished I had been chipping away at it a little bit more, because it's with everybody entering the portal now and new guys popping up, new offers going out. It's there's a lot to sort of keep track of. Well, so hopefully this afternoon I'm gonna be able to hit publish on this thing. We'll have a new target watch list update, an extensive update that will sort of give you the latest on some of these guys. But you're always looking in recruiting, in my opinion, at finding mutual interest. And so when we're reporting on it, we're trying to find mutual interest. If we tell you, hey, South Carolina is interested in this guy, but the kid is not interested in South Carolina, ultimately, that's not going to be a recruitment that we probably end up following to the end. Likewise, that can be reversed. So the two guys that I think, as we sit here at 2:19 on Monday afternoon, and the other thing about portal recruiting, man, it's just sped up to like an exponential amount compared to regular high school recruiting, right? So it was interesting getting online this morning, and On3 with Andy Staples was running a live show, and they were just, it was literally like, hey, this guy's entered the portal, that guy's entered the portal, this guy's getting in the portal, hey, this report says this guy is. It reminded me of old school National Signing Day when ESPN would have the live show. It was like Christmas. It was just constant activity. That's what this is now. That's what the last week has been like, honestly. So it is different. These things will change quickly, I think. However, the two guys that I think you can go ahead and just circle as there appears to be absolute mutual interest on both sides, to me, would be Jaden McGowan, speedster, wide receiver from Vanderbilt, and then Gerald Kilgore, who's a former quarterback turned defensive back at Tennessee Tech. And I think both those guys just make a lot of sense for various reasons. Both those guys could fill needs, and both those guys have connections to South Carolina that kind of puts the Gamecocks, I think, in the driver's seat. Let's start with McGowan. He announced last week he was going in. He officially went in today. He's already announced that he's got an offer. So no slow playing here, no easing into it. Gamecocks have said, hey, we want you to come home. There's a lot of indications that Jay McGowan is very interested in coming home. So, Chris, I look at it, you got to fill several needs at wide receiver. This could be your direct replacement for AB as sort of your speedy, quick slot wide receiver.
Yeah, it is not a carbon copy, Wes, but it is interesting, right, that you do lose a Marion Brown, who is a guy that, Wes, I'm honestly surprised that he wasn't a little bit more prolific here. Obviously, he was injured some, and then the offense over the past couple years at times was not what it needed to be. But man, AB, a guy that had talent, right, and had at South Carolina a lot of speed, and I think he showed that how he could be used out of the slot. McGowan, again, built different, right? Smaller guy in terms of stature, but he's really well put together. He kind of has like sprinter's legs when you look at him, right? 5'8", but 180 pounds or so, I think is what he's listed at. And Wes, we saw this guy in camp coming out of high school, out of Lawrence, run at South Carolina's camp and put down something in the 4.3 range in the 40s. So he can really, really run. And look, there are really good players at other schools. And some people say, oh, Vandy, you're recruiting not one, but two receivers from Vandy, Will Shepard, Jade McGowan. But Will Shepard's a big-time player and has been, right? Jade McGowan, a fast player who still has some time to continue developing. Vandy's got a lot of other issues, right? And they have good players there. And their other receiver, Wes, London Humphrey, Georgia, in the mix. Probably the favorite to land him, right? So they have players there. McGowan, Palmetto State guy, like you said, fast. Wes, he can contribute as a kick returner. That's another area to look at. You won't have DeCarrion Joyner who's done that. You're losing Xavier Luedecke. So this, to me, makes a lot of sense, a lot of familiarity on both sides.
Yeah, man, for sure. And I think you sort of – I'm looking at it like you've got to kind of rebuild out this receiving core. So I'm not sitting here saying McGowan is your only receiver you're going to go get. I think you're going to get several guys out of the portal. I think you really truly need that bigger body. You need a Luedecke clone if there's one out there that exists. But
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be great. Losing Juice Wells, that hurts like that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it from a talent standpoint. A guy who can go get open, a guy who's open even when they're not open. That's what you need, but you also kind of need to build out the guys around that. I think McGowan can be a really, really solid, kind of from an NFL standpoint, you'd say he's like a number 2 receiver, a slot guy. Like you said, extra value from special teams, extra value from just having the speed element. You can run him down the seam. You can sort of take the top off of defense at times as well, move him around, and has done it at the SEC level. Chris, I remember looking at that Vanderbilt team when we were scouting them going into that game, and we're going, hey, wide receiver is sort of the spot they can hurt you the most. That's where Vanderbilt had the most talent. And poor guys, they've lost all like their top guys.
They've lost their starting quarterback, all 3 starting receivers, their best linebacker, their best DB, and I think their best defensive lineman. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Tough deal.
Ricky Wright, is that
Yep.
They got him as like a true blue chip 4-star guy, right?
Yeah, really good get for them.
I know South Carolina's got their own things to navigate in the portal era. But dude, Vandy. Whew. I don't know how you deal, but we got too much South Carolina to get to before we go into a Vanderbilt breakdown. But back to McGowan, it makes sense on all sides. I thought about just going ahead and throwing in a prediction. I kind of want to make sure there's not something we're missing here. Does another school hop in, get involved? But I think right now, just as we sit here right now, heavy lean towards him ending up at South Carolina. And, visit not set up yet as of a couple hours ago, but I could see that changing, frankly, very quickly. I could see him locking one in for this weekend. We've already seen them start to lock in visits for this weekend. I could see him being one of them. And then so the other guy I mentioned, Gerald Kilgore, Jalen Kilgore's brother. He's at Tennessee Tech, entered the portal. He's got an offer from South Carolina now. He's told Gamecock Central he's set up an official visit for this weekend. And, Chris, this is a guy people, will maybe sleep on this if it does end up being, a reunion, a Kilgore family reunion at South Carolina. But, dude, it's one of those guys that played quarterback in high school, making the transition to DB, had 5 pass breakups in the last 4 games of the year. Tells you how active he is. Kind of came on strong late in the year and super athlete in high school, region player of the year in baseball, has I think a top 3 finish in track in 2 or 3 different sports, top 3 state finishes, and also was region player of the year his senior year for football. And so again, was playing quarterback, has made that move to DB, really started to kind of find himself there. And this would just make a lot of sense for South Carolina for all kinds of reasons, I think.
Yeah, would make a lot of sense. Obviously, the Kilgore family, Wes, has some pretty good athletes in it, and Gerald, a lot like Jalen was in high school, would just playing multiple sports, really playing everywhere. I remember Jalen told us last week on the Garnet Trust Tower 107.5 The Game that he really didn't come off the field. I mean, he played offense, he played defense, every special team except for I think the punt team, right? And so Gerald, being a high school quarterback, there have been a lot of examples of that, Wes, of guys at South Carolina who've ended up excelling and at other schools, right? But just thinking locally, Stephon Gilmore, former high school quarterback, DJ Swearinger played both ways, including quarterback in high school, and there are others. But this is a guy that I think you made a good point. You look at the numbers toward the end of the year last season, and he really started to come on, and that just, I think, speaks to the continued development and that progression arc. Jalen Kilgore, a guy, West, that actually Garnet Trust just announced they have signed to an NIL deal. So Jalen Kilgore, young player that you want to lock up, which it appears they've done. And this is this is not just a throw in, though, right? This is a guy that South Carolina really, really appears to like, and you can see when you start digging into Gerald Kilgore why the staff likes him.
Yeah, Kilgore officially signed to a Garnet Trust deal. Gamecock fans will be happy to hear and see that. Recruit all the Kilgores. Like if there's another brother in there, recruit him as well, because I think just the mindset, the on and off the field, the football IQ, all those things. These guys are players, and so makes a lot of sense. And I think as someone could come in, and I actually think Gerald could come in and be a rotational guy for South Carolina. It's going to be important to kind of reload those spots as well. When you look at losing like a Kawan Banks, who I think Kawan was going to be a little bit limited in terms of ever being a true starter at South Carolina. But you need depth, as we've seen. So I think to add, to continue to kind of rebuild the depth there in the defensive backfield is important for your overall team health as well. It is, as we kind of bounce around here, Chris, I'm seeing other names from other schools announce they're going in the portal. Isn't it crazy how many guys we can look at, or fans could even look at, that follow recruiting and be like, yep, remember that guy. Remember that guy. I texted you earlier, Reggie Grimes, who was a big target for South Carolina as like a defensive end edge guy. He's at Oklahoma. He's in the portal. I just saw Hollywood Smothers, running back at OU from Charlotte, right?
He's from West Charlotte. That's right.
Yeah, Dalen Smothers has officially entered the transfer portal.
Dude, just the amount of big name quarterbacks is crazy. Brock Vandegrift, who's a former 5-star, went in for Georgia, and he's not factored in a big way so far, but former highly rated guy. But even going past him, Kyle McCord, who went 11-1 at Ohio State, Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma, Cam Ward, Dante Moore, Riley Leonard, Grayson McCall, DJU again. I mean, on and on and on. There's just a ton of big name quarterbacks. And there's a lot of guys that have gone in, whether it's at quarterback or another spot, that you go, man, I didn't realize that guy was unhappy, or, hey, it looks like that guy's playing. Like, what's the deal? And it's been fascinating to watch it for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, man. You know what else is going to be fascinating? How do you kind of manage which guys you sort of go all out for? It's
Fill a spot early.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's such a rotating board. Um, you got to be careful not to take just anybody, but also you don't want to pass on a guy that can really help you while you're chasing the dreams of a guy everybody in the country wants. So I think you got to, and that's the case with all recruiting. But again, it's just so sped up during this. Like this is a sprint right now, and I promise you, those guys that I would like to announce I'm going to enter the portal. Those guys that were doing that last week, they were already formulating their lists in their heads. And they were probably already been told in a lot of cases, hey, this school is interested in you. Hey, this school may reach out. So it's going to be fascinating to see how you sort of manage it. We know South Carolina wants receivers. We know South Carolina wants, a running back. We know there's several other spots where they're going to want to go get guys. So, I think that part is going to be very, very interesting to track moving forward.
Yeah, it will. And I think to go back to something you said there at the beginning, like managing this board, right? You have a smaller window. So let's think about the 2024 high school recruiting class. Well, that's a board that you've been setting as a college staff for 2 or 3 years. You know, you're going to offer some guys a couple years ahead. You're going to have them in camp. You're going to constantly assess them. You're going to kind of be able to figure out where you stand. You're going to get commitments along the way, like in the summer, in the spring, during the season when you bring them in for officials, early commitments, right? And so you can manage those numbers. Well, now you have all this activity condensed into this 30-day window, a little bit more than 30 days because it was open for graduate transfers, really, really the whole time. But now that it's open to everybody, now you've got underclassmen jumping in too, guys with multiple years of eligibility, guys who have finished up their conference title games and are graduates. You got all that crowd going in. And now it's condensed, right? Now, a lot of times you might have one spot or two spots. You might say, we want a quarterback, if you're another school. And so now you have to assess the market for that. You might say we need 2 wide receivers. Well, what if there's 20 wide receivers that go in the portal that you like enough to where you would offer and take them? And of course, you're going to rank them internally. But Wes, what if you take a couple and you get a couple and then you find out later where you could have gotten these guys or a couple more jump in that maybe you could have taken a swing on? So to me, it's tougher to manage the transfer portal right now in this condensed window, especially when you have so many needs. So South Carolina, we know they've got a lot of portal needs. So the way that they navigate this, we know it's a critical offseason. They've got to come away from the transfer portal grabbing some meaningful names at multiple positions, meaningful players rather. And so the way that they manage this, I think, is going to be very interesting, and not only here but other places too.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Around college football, you're seeing quarterbacks transfer out that are starters, which is crazy to see. And I think that the McCord situation. I was listening to the On Three guys earlier today. Apparently, Chris, there are rumblings that this wasn't all his decision, which sounds crazy because he was a starter on a top 10 team in America that was just outside the college football playoff. But, I think how much of these decisions do you think also come down to, all right, did my school, if I'm a quarterback, if I'm a starter, if I'm the next guy in line, so to speak, is my school looking for my replacement in the transfer portal? And how do I handle that? MJ Morris at NC State took a lot of flack for, basically shutting himself down, redshirting himself. But, since reporting has come out basically saying, hey, MJ was looking out for himself, like it or not, because NC State looked out for themselves when they went out and got a transfer quarterback to play over him this season.
And Wes, I think, would have probably, if I had to take a guess, I don't know the inner workings of NC State, probably would have done that even if MJ Morris is on the roster next season, I would think. If you got a chance to go get Grayson McCall or somebody else, I think you probably do that.
Yeah. But I just think you gotta make your decisions aren't in a vacuum, I think. So school's gotta be very careful. You could say, hey, the kids ain't loyal. Well, the schools are out there making decisions too. So
that's right.
All that sort of bubbles up into what you see, I think. All right, guys, can y'all just chill out with putting the fake news on in the chat? Like that's it doesn't do anybody any good. Like y'all just chill. We're all here to talk about the portal and provide actual info and discussion. So yeah, let's chill out. Anyway, Chris, what do you think as far as some of these other receivers in the portal in terms of South Carolina? I mean, you look around the country, there's a lot of talent at the portal position. I feel like other than McGowan, who we, like I said, that's like a confirmed, like if you're building out this board and you were putting two guys, that it's just all right. There's a decent, probably a good chance they're going to end up in Columbia. I think there's two guys on that list right now. There may be others, but we just maybe haven't gotten a hold of that info yet. So to me, I feel like the receiver board with other guys, I don't think we quite know yet. Hey, where is this mutual interest level at? Like some of them we know South Carolina has interest, but we're not sure yet if it's going to play out like that. And I think I will say this, just like high school recruiting, follow the visits.
Yeah.
If you start getting a guy on your campus, that means this is real. That doesn't mean you're definitely going to get them. Generally, the portal guys, seems like they, on average, maybe take 2 or 3 visits. So that's how I think you judge, all right, there's very real interest from this prospect. Because the portal guys, they don't seem to waste their time. They don't seem to waste their trips. Like you maybe see a high school guy, I'm just going to go enjoy the process. These guys are more just like, I got to find my next home. It's a business decision. It's just a little bit different with the portal guys.
Yeah, for sure. The window is smaller, right? You're not working on a 2 or 3 year, recruiting relationship. It's much more. A lot of these guys have 1 year, Wes. Not all of them. I mean, some of the ones we've been talking about even don't have just 1 year, but a lot of them do. They're eyeing this as their final season. And so it's about, where can I go and develop? Where can I go and win? Where can I maximize my on-field talents? And yes, sometimes the NIL equation plays into it. Where can I maximize that for my remaining years? So I actually chatted with a little bit, exchanged some messages with a portal prospect that South Carolina is recruiting, Wes. And he was like, look, I just went in, like, I'm just trying to catch up on texts and calls and kind of see where things are at right now. And so for a lot of these guys, it's a scramble. You hear a lot, hey, when guys go in the portal, they know where they're going. That is the case for some guys. They have that one school picked out. Some guys have their short list. But there are some that have, maybe they got some destinations in mind, but they're not quite sure how things are going to shake out. That was probably the case with Spencer Rattler, Wes, a couple years ago. South Carolina, when he entered the portal, wasn't even a thought, and that just kind of happened. So we'll see where it goes. Gamecocks have dispensed several different receiver offers. I mean, I can think of, even if they haven't been reported as offers, there's offers in place, right? Like, I don't know if it's been reported that South Carolina's offered Will Shepherd from Vanderbilt. They would take Will Shepherd from Vanderbilt, Chris Mitchell from FIU. There's a bunch of them. Michigan State has another receiver in the portal. So we don't really know yet. And I think these next few days will tell a little bit more of the story as far as, I think you made a great point. Follow the visits, right? If you start seeing visits by certain wide receivers set following along on Gamecock Central, we'll bring you that news. And if you see that happen, that's a guy to really kind of pencil in as this guy's a strong possibility, because I think they're going to cast a fairly wide net, especially at the receiver position.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to do so, because everybody's kind of playing the game at that position, I think, but there's a ton of guys in there. So it's going to be very important to sort of how do you manage it correctly. Let's see. Christian Fitzpatrick, the name of the Michigan State receiver you were referring to there, man. You got Jared Brown at Coastal Carolina, an interesting guy that South Carolina has expressed interest in. So let's see. Not a wide receiver, but Gerquan Scott from Southern Miss officially going to visit South Carolina during the midweek, sort of December 12th through 14th, around that time, has already said that he's going to visit South Carolina. So there's a guy to kind of keep an eye on as far as portal visits. I think O-line will be interesting. I think we're still getting a feel for which of the upperclassmen will come back, Chris. I think that's a spot where South Carolina they've recruited well out of high school. And I think you got to build your O-line with high school recruiting. You cannot build it out of the portal. And the guys that are just bona fide true starting tackles that can play in the SEC and play well, there's just not many of them in the portal, man. There's really not. I think you can find some depth guys. I think you can find some solid interior guys in the portal. So, I think that's a spot where as much as they struggled this year at times at O-line, they have set themselves up pretty well for the future at that position. So I think you're a little bit more selective with portal guys on the offensive line. Chris, depending on what your overall numbers look like when sort of your portal outward, guys moving on, when all that's kind of settled.
Yeah, it's a good point. Balancing the fact that, hey, you've got some young talent on this roster from the 2023 class. You've got some talent coming in for 24. Seems like, Wes, they're off to a good start in 25. And what you don't want to do is go into the portal and start reaching, Hey, let's grab a junior who probably isn't going to make a big impact just to put another body here, right? To a large extent, South Carolina's taken its lumps. They had a tough year on the offensive line last season, and I think there are a few things that weighed in there. Number one, that wasn't going to be an elite offensive line even if it was fully healthy. Could have been a solid group, right? So that's for starters. Number two, you had a bunch of injuries. That weighed in. And number three, you played a couple true freshmen, and not only played them, you started them, right? And Marquis Anderson would have factored in if he were not hurt. So there were several different things there. So now you're looking at an offseason and going, well, how can we get better? Well, you do have to get better. And if the transfer portal is an option for you to bring in a guy that you feel like is a plug and play and you can get him, then you do that. But again, I don't think you look in and you go, we got to get better. let's reach on a couple transfer portal offensive linemen. You would rather continue developing the guys on your roster, I think, than do that. So we know Scott's one. There are others that the staff will continue to look at as well.
Yeah, I think they'll be careful. I think that, they're still going to cast a net out there. It's not going to be, hey, this one guy. But I think you'll be a little bit more careful about who you take, just because I think you really like those young guys, man. And what I've heard internally, they feel like that entire freshman class were recruiting hits from just an evaluation standpoint, which is a good thing. And then you bring in this next group of 2024, getting a ton of 2025s on campus already. I think you kind of secretly like the sort of fabric of that position going forward. Let's talk running back, man. I think you look at that spot. We'll see what happens here with Mario Anderson. That's a guy who obviously has played a good bit for you this past year. South Carolina would love to have him back. And, I think pairing someone up with him, though, is pretty important when you look at the portal. Don Chaney Jr., a guy to at least keep an eye on. They're still monitoring some things there. Then several running backs already out there in the portal too, with varying, I would say, production so far in their careers. And I think you really have to, that's a spot where you really got to dive down in there and try to figure out, all right, this guy was a top 10 back. I'm talking in general. This guy was a top 10 back out of high school. Why has he not played more? Why does he not have more production? Is he behind a couple of 5-stars? This is when, you're on a very abbreviated time schedule, but you got to be smart about which one you're going to actually kind of push the cards into the table on.
Yeah, that really is the best, maybe the best for South Carolina, Wes, illustration of kind of a little bit of a catch-22, right? Where if you push your chips to the middle of the table for a guy, hey, who else is out there? Who else could be out there? So we know some of the names. Don Chaney Jr., Gamecock legacy. His father played receiver for the Gamecocks and then in the NFL in the 90s. High school coach in Miami. Don, a name that's familiar to folks that follow South Carolina recruiting because he visited back in the 2020 class. So he's certainly an option for you, right? He's had a few injuries during his career. So do you bake that in? Then you've got, I would imagine, Wes, they're going to at least take a look at Smothers from Oklahoma. They offered him out of high school, didn't have a lot of traction. You have Evan Pryor from Ohio State, who was a very highly ranked guy, had a knee injury in 2022, but he's been back now. A lot of talent, very fast guy. You've got George Petway, a young guy from North Carolina who redshirted this year because some others were ahead of him. You got Elijah Green from North Carolina, who also didn't play as much this year, but has been a starter at times at UNC. Lots of interesting names out there. And I suspect, Wes, more than one that South Carolina would like to take. But who can you get? And then how do you juggle those in terms of priorities? One thing we do know, I very much think that South Carolina does want a transfer portal back. So more offers could go out. We'll probably hear more about involvement with certain guys over the next few days.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Tell you what, let's break this thing up just a little bit and tell you about our friends at Liberty Tax. 803-462-5576. It is the beginning of December, which means, guess what? Tax time right around the corner. Go ahead and get a head start. Call Larry and his friends at Liberty Tax, 3 convenient locations right here in Columbia at 803-462-5576. If you've had life changes, maybe you're making more money now, maybe you started a side business, maybe you got married. Any of those things are going to affect your tax position. And there are some things you could do right now to maybe better prepare for actual tax time once it starts, once we hit that new year. So, again, call Larry and his team today, 803-462-5576. I know Chris Clark has been dealing with getting his taxes all set up for the new year, and they've been great to deal with, and they can help you do the exact same. So, again, call them today. They'll take care of you. Let's see, Chris. So I don't know if I need to. I think I've probably already given this bunch my healthy transfer sort of
Spiel.
spiel. Yeah. Tyler said it was a manifesto. I don't like to use that word. I feel like there's a connotation there of a crazy person. But
That's a very reason. I like doctrine and corollary, if we're going to use a big word.
corollary. Wow, I don't think I know what that means, to be honest. But but seriously, as you start to see, Taka Hemingway, he's coming back. Jalen Kilgore, TJ Sanders, both, have signed deals with Garnet Trust. And, we'll see what some of these other guys do, but certainly some positive expectations there with several other guys, as we've reported on Gamecock Central. And so, yes, you are going to have transfers out right now of guys who are just looking for a fresh start, guys who want to play, right? Guys who are just saying, look, when I sat down with the coaches, my playing time was not going to be much more next year compared to what it was this year. And it maybe would not be the year after that either. So these are your more traditional healthy transfers. Tonka Hemingway had an NFL option. There are, of course, rumors about other schools with Tonka, that he was possibly going to hit the portal. There's been rumors about other players. And they did lose Juice Wells, which, as we're seeing throughout college football today, South Carolina is not alone in having lost one of their best players. And I think that you have to acknowledge that. But also, I think South Carolina is actually much better situated than they were this time last year in terms of roster retention. When you look at the number of contributing players they lost last year. So all these guys that have left or are leaving are not equal situations, I think. And matter of fact, I would put Juice Wells in a category by himself.
Yeah.
And, Mitch Jeter's been really good. I get it. Mitch Jeter also, he's been here his entire career. He gave you his full eligibility, or what would have been traditional eligibility. He's graduating. He wants to try something new. I have a hard time finding any fault with that. Then I think you go another level down. You're sort of guys that I'm like, okay, I probably would have tried to keep them, but I get it. I put a Mega Blake and, a Kawan Banks in that category. They've played. They've helped you. But then you do have a lot of guys that I think if you're South Carolina, you shake their hand, they shake your hand, and everybody wishes each other well because maybe some of these guys just want to go somewhere where they can play.
Yeah. I love the healthy transfer doctrine. I'll use that word. It's kind of in between. That's not a big dictionary word. The healthy transfer doctrine is a real thing. And Wes, I think the biggest thing, the most important thing I will say to do is, as everyone navigates the portal era and this window of this 30 days or so that we're all going to go through and follow, who does South Carolina come out with, right? Because in recruiting, it's all about who you get. And if you miss out on guys in recruiting, whether it's transfer, high school, JUCO, there can be some tough losses in there. Like if a guy that you want goes somewhere else, that's tough. But the ultimate question is, who is in your class? And so let's look at the wide receiver room, for instance. You've got some guys that had not made substantial contributions yet in their career. You've got somebody like Juice Wells who's made huge contributions. You got somebody that's kind of in between, like Omega Blake, to where he's done some things and you feel like maybe he could take another step forward. And so those guys are leaving. Now, the key is, what do you get in the room next year? And that includes, how does Tyshawn Russell and Nick Harbor and all these guys, like, how do they develop That's a big part of it. But then how do your freshmen play? Who else is in your freshman class? We don't know that. You know, they got a couple. They got Mazio Bennett committed. Zamarian Lane could play wide receiver in theory. And then you got the transfer class, right? So a lot of this is going to hinge, yes, on that transfer class, but all those things are going to be important. And so we know who they've lost and the different kind of, if you want to put them at levels, who are you going to get, right? Wells is the hardest to replace. Can you get a big time receiver or two out of the portal? And then can you fill the rest of the roster with guys that can play roles and compete and add depth?
And I think, man, if you go out there, by the way, we had a question about Trey Knox. No, he does not have eligibility left. If you can't, let's say you can't find that kind of bona fide, just, hey, every defense coordinator you face has to account for this wide receiver, which is kind of what you had with Luedecke. Everybody knew this is the guy we have to actually scheme for. Well, if you don't find that guy, I think it makes it incredibly important that you kind of have, remember those final Spurrier teams, where you had like kind of solid receivers across the board and they all could get open. But, this was sort of like, I guess you would have had Bruce, Ace, Nick, who were all like really good, but weren't quite in that category that I'm talking about. And so to me, if you're not going to have the one guy everybody has to just game plan for, you better have really good players at all three receiver positions, and you better have some depth to rotate them in and out, I think. So I think, Mazio Bennett probably plays early, probably gets in there as a true freshman, but you really don't want to have to force him into being a starter right off the bat. If he wins it, if he's the guy, if he just goes in there and takes it, then, yeah, you're very happy with that development. But you don't want to put that on his shoulders, I feel like, nor do you want to put it on the shoulders of any other freshman you may bring in at that position. So, I think this could be one of their bigger wide receiver portal hauls that we have seen in quite some time.
It could be, right? You just look at the sheer need. A follow-up question some of the listeners, watchers may have is how many? And I'll admit I don't know for sure. I haven't been given a firm number. Can we just say multiple and leave it at that, right? I mean, you look at the number of offers they've issued, and even beyond that, the number of guys that we know they're interested in and or would take that maybe haven't tweeted out an offer. There's several. And you look at the need, again, losing the guy that would have been your top receiver in Wells coming back, and then losing some depth, and then losing a guy like Omega Blake who has played a good many snaps for you. There are a lot of questions at this position going into 2024. So, Wes, I can't give a number, but shoot, I mean, if they could get three good portal receivers, wouldn't they take them? I would think so. But they need a couple good quality receivers, at least in my opinion, out of the portal.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say three. That's not anything I've been told, but that maybe that's because Wells was number 3 and they got to replace him, and it's just in my head. Maybe it's because you have 3 starting wide receivers. Don't know, but that is the number that kind of keeps popping up in my mind as well. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. But also, it's got to be, you can't take guys just to take them, I think. No. So that's got to be a part of the equation as well. These got to be guys that can come in and absolutely help you and make a pretty immediate impact, I think, moving forward. I'm trying to get a confirmation on this directly, but it appears Jaden McGowan told Sports Talk, the Phil Kornblut bunch, that he is going to visit this weekend. So we all can kind of draw I feel like I should put in a prediction right here as we sit, Chris, on the On 3 RPM. Let's get into it. Do what?
I was just saying a live prediction. I
Yeah,
like
live
it.
prediction. Let's get into a couple of guys that came back, man. Then we'll get out of here. We got to keep the updates rolling on Gamecock Central, but just to kind of lock in Tonka Hemingway, to lock in TJ Sanders. We're anticipating good news for South Carolina with Boogie Huntley, and that's a spot where I do think, man, you start to look ahead. You got to start to sort of revamp the future of that room. You lose McLeod. You lose out on Amari Adams. So the future of that room does not look the same as let's say, the future of the O-line, where you're like,
Right.
man, we got some good young talent waiting in the wings. D-line, they got to start to restock there. But in terms of right now, this year, you look at keeping those three. You look at bringing in potentially a Jerome Simmons from the JUCO ranks, a little bit older guy as well. I feel like you can feel okay about your defensive tackle room and having some guys there if you do want to run that 3-3-5 some more that can expand out and kind of help you fill out those different spots. You, of course, bring in Dylan Stewart at the edge spot, bona fide 5-star pass rusher. I think you start to think, all right, who's my other pass rusher that I'm adding in this class as well, whether that's high school or maybe going portal there as well. But I think in terms of just kind of solidifying a position, you took a couple of major steps by keeping Tonka, TJ, and then we're expecting Boogie as well.
Yeah, I mean, Wes, what would the picture look like if, let's say, TJ Sanders, look, if a guy like TJ Sanders would have opted in this day and age to enter the transfer portal, and to be clear, he wanted to come back, right? But if he had opted to do so, he could have done it and drawn some big time interest and some big time NIL offers. If Tonka Hemingway would have said, you know what? I've played my several years of college football. I'm going to the NFL, right? Like Jim Nagy from Senior Bowl said he's one of their favorites, like on Twitter today. And he wouldn't be a first round pick or anything, but he would get drafted. And then let's say those two guys left. And even if Boogie Huntley came back, right, one of your starters who's a good player and a team captain, the picture in terms of the starters and the depth would not be great. So these are big, big wins for South Carolina to get back for 2024. But you're right. You start looking beyond that. You need to start developing some more depth and start getting some guys kind of waiting in the wings to take some snaps this year, sure, but also to develop for the future. I imagine, Wes, this time next year, kind of like we're saying, hey, wide receiver is a big portal position for this year in advance of 2024. Next year around this time, I think defensive tackle is probably going to be a big one because South Carolina will have lost at least a couple seniors in Huntley and Tonka Hemingway.
Yeah, for sure, man. Nick Barrett, an older player now too. Seems like he just got here for some reason to me, but a lot of the guys that it feels like they just got here are now upperclassmen. So you're always going to have, situations where you have to replace those guys. If it had worked out better with McLeod, he's maybe one of the guys you're saying, hey, he's next in line, but it just did not happen that way. So got to go out and find different ways to fill it. By the way, McGowan did confirm to us that he's got an OV set for South Carolina this weekend. So South Carolina will look to go ahead and lock down one of those receiver needs. That's one of those, man, kind of reminds me maybe a little of like JT Gear. Just makes too much sense on all sides there for it not to potentially work out. So be on the lookout for South Carolina to potentially add him over the weekend. We'll see which portal guy jumps in first. What have we not hit today, Chris, that you want to hit, man?
Wes, there's so many things. I mean, there's a ton, but honestly, we probably just need to save some. Well, I say that.
There'll be some new things to talk about by
the
Wednesday.
time we get to Wednesday, there'll be, or whenever we do our next show, there's going to be a ton of other things too. But that's really, I think we hit on the biggest things that we needed to hit on today. There is a lot of leftover, and we don't do this a lot, Wes. I'm gonna say you put up the deal at the beginning of the show. I promise you, Wes and I and the rest of the team, we're busting it, working the phones, typing feverishly, trying to get the info as fast as we can. We got a ton of stuff up on Gamecock Central. So if you do like our work on here, if you enjoy the show, come on over to GamecockCentral.com. Check out the deal that we have. Come join us because we got a lot of stuff going up, and we'll have even more, throughout the rest of this week.
By the way, Chris, shout out to our guy Beckham. He's got us pulled up on the big screen. He's looking at our faces for radio live on the 70-incher, I think. But shout out to him. He says, hey, if you're not watching GC Live right now, what are you even doing? What's wrong with you? So go ahead. Nick Terrio says, where's your quarter zips? Hey, the quarter zips, they got a big game on Wednesday. We'll talk about that later on in the week. But South Carolina getting some love in the net rankings for what I saw today. So obviously great start for Lamont Paris and his group. I believe they're meeting with the media today. So we'll have some coverage from that on Gamecock Central as well. But wall-to-wall transfer portal coverage, GamecockCentral.com. Come on over if you're not a subscriber. Again, use SCAR1, $1 for your first 2 months. And guys, I promise you, I'm gonna have this big board, we're calling it, the transfer portal target watch list, updated with the latest on a bunch of guys. So that'll be everything you need to know in one spot. And also, we're gonna go ahead and start working on an official visit list for this weekend as well, because that's starting to kind of, I would say, expand or starting to become a thing as well, where there's enough guys on there to track. And so we'll have that soon as well. So come on over, GamecockCentral.com. If you're not a subscriber, come join us. If you're already a subscriber, we definitely appreciate you. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll talk to you soon.